Recording this so somebody knows. It came back tonight, standing past the lower pasture, right at the fence where the old posts are. It's got the wool again, gray wool, handfuls of it, pressing it into the wood of every post, every rail, working its way down the line, slow and steady, like it's doing a chore. Daddy always said, if you ever see something working a fence line after dark, you do not go out there. You do not open the door. You sit still, and you breathe slow, and you wait for morning. But it's been 3 nights now, and I don't know how many more. It turned. It turned and it looked at the house. Don't move. Redacted Archives, Case File 417, Subject Designation, The Wool Gatherer, Region, Pendleton County, West Virginia, Hoover Creek Township, Population at time of incident, sparse. The way it's always been up there. You settle in, get comfortable where you are. I'm going to tell you about the wool gatherer, the way it was told to me. Slow and careful and honest, by a man named Albert Burrow Ramsay, 73 years old. Born and raised within 6 miles of where this thing first came to his family's attention. Never left. Albert Ramsay did not embellish. He spoke the way the old men of those mountains always spoke, like every word had been weighed before it left his mouth. So I will tell you what he told me. The first thing you have to understand about the high ridges of Pendleton County is that they are not like other places. I don't mean that as poetry. I mean it as fact that anyone who has spent a winter up there will confirm. The ridges fold in on themselves. The hollows run deep and crooked, and sound behaves differently in them. A voice can carry a full mile in one direction and die dead 20 feet in another. The fog off Spruce Mountain comes in low and slow and sits in the bowl of the valley like something poured there deliberately. And the old pastures, the ones that haven't been worked in 30, 40 years, they go back to a grass that isn't quite the same as managed fields. Coarser, grayer, the kind of grass that makes you think about what the land looked like before anyone ever put a fence post in it. And it is about fence posts that this whole story turns. The Ramsay family had been running sheep on those hillsides for generations. Cedar fence posts along the lower pasture, sunk by hand into rocky soil. most of 'em weathered to a soft silver gray by decades of rain and the particular kind of silence that settles into wood over time. The fence ran along the bottom edge of the property, past the creek's long, slow bend, then up along the tree line before turning back toward the barn. It was a good fence. Was. The first sign was the wool. Not on the sheep. The sheep were fine. The wool appeared on the fence posts, small tufts of it, gray-white, coarse as briars, pressed into the grain of the old cedar like it had been worked there by careful hands, deliberately, the way you'd press a seal into wax. His grandmother noticed it first, a sharp-eyed woman named Corva, who had grown up 3 ridges over and who knew the names of things that most people in that county had long since stopped teaching their children. She called his grandfather out to look. They stood at the fence line in the early morning. Frost still laid out flat and white across the grass, their breath coming in soft clouds. They looked at the tufts of wool caught in the wood of the posts, one after another, down the line, regular as fence staples. And Corva Ramsay did not say a word for a long while. She stood with her hands in her coat pockets and looked. Then she turned back toward the house and said, quietly, not alarmed, not yet, just quietly, something is learning the shape of this place. There are things in the old Appalachian understanding of the world that never made it into books. Things passed down at kitchen tables and in barns, on cold porches after the children were put to bed. Spoken in the same matter-of-fact tone you'd use to say a wet summer means more copperheads along the creek bank. Not superstition, information. One of those things was this, that there are presences in the high country. The old folks use that word, presences, though it is far too soft a word, that navigate not by sight, not by smell, but by what you might call memory lines. The accumulated weight of living things left in a place over generations. A fence post touched 10,000 times by the same family's hands holds something like a trail marker for these things. A path worn deep into a hillside by the same boots over 40 years is a road they can read clearly. And the wool is how they mark what they've read. Pressed into the wood, worked into the grain. It is not vandalism. It is notation. A record kept in fiber and wood. A way of saying, I have been here. I have read this. I am learning you. Corva Ramsay knew this. Her grandmother had told her, and her grandmother's grandmother before that, running back unbroken through the women of those hills to a time when such knowledge was not superstition. It was simply common sense. The wool gatherer, she told her husband that cold October morning, does not mean harm by its nature. It is a thing of inventory. It catalogs. It collects. The question, the one that would keep her watching that fence line for the rest of that autumn, was what it intended to do with what it collected. Albert Ramsay was 8 years old the first time he saw it. He had gotten up in the night to use the outhouse. He stepped off the back porch into the cold dark in his bare feet. The moon was 3/4 full, and the lower pasture was lit in that silver blue light that makes everything look cut from the same piece of quiet. And he saw it. Standing at the far end of the fence line, he stopped moving. Something in him, something older than his 8 years, something the mountains had put there without asking, told him very clearly and without urgency to simply stop. Not to run, not to call out, just to stop and breathe slow and stay. Tall, taller than it had any right to be, in the way something looks when your eyes are trying to make it into a person and the proportions won't cooperate. Dressed in gray, or perhaps not dressed. Perhaps that was simply the color of it, the texture, the same gray as old cedar posts, old wool, old fog. It moved along the fence line slowly, not walking exactly. Albert searched for the right word and finally settled on progressing, the way a river progresses, the way weather progresses across a ridge, with a kind of inevitability, deliberate without being hurried. In its hands, or what served as hands, it carried something bundled against its chest, gray-white, loose, soft-looking. It was pressing the wool to every post, working its way down the line with a quiet thoroughness that Albert found, and this is the exact word he used, the word he'd held on to for 65 years. He found it companionable. Like watching someone do a chore they'd done 1,000 times. And that ease, that familiarity, frightened him far more than any strangeness would have. That his first instinct, standing barefoot in the frost, watching this gray, impossible thing work the fence line in moonlight, was something close to recognition. He stood there until it reached the bend where the fence curved toward the tree line, and then it stopped. And Albert Ramsay, 8 years old, felt the specific cold of being looked at in the dark. Not the cold of October air against bare feet, the other cold, the kind that starts somewhere behind your sternum and spreads out through your ribs. It did not move toward him. It did not make a sound. It simply acknowledged him. the way you might acknowledge a stone in a field you've walked past 100 times. Not a greeting, not a threat, an inventory entry. Then it moved on, into the tree line, into the dark between the pines, gone as simply as a cloud shadow moves off a hillside. And Albert went back inside and lay in his bed and stared at the ceiling until morning came gray and slow over the ridge. He never thought to wake his parents, because somehow, and this is what stayed with him most, somehow he understood there was nothing to report, that he had simply witnessed something that had been happening for a very long time, that his being there to see it was just one more thing it had now accounted for, one more entry. There are a number of theories about what the wool gatherer actually does with what it collects. The oldest accounts suggest the gray-white material it presses into the wood is not gathered from sheep at all, or not only from sheep, that it is something it produces itself, the way a spider produces silk from its own body, and that what it leaves behind in the grain of old wood is not simply a mark, it is a record, a memory pressed into the wood. Because here is what those oldest accounts say happens to the grief of a place, the sorrow that accumulates in a home over generations, the children who didn't come back, the winters that were too hard, the slow wearing away of things that can't be replaced, does not dissipate on its own. It does not float away like wood smoke. It settles into the soil, into the walls, into the fence posts a man lays his hand on every morning of his adult life. And the wool gatherer reads it there, draws it out, slowly, gently, the way you'd card raw wool through a comb, drawing out the tangles, and takes it away into wherever it originates from. Albert sat with that idea when I offered it to him there at his kitchen table. He looked out his window at the old lower pasture, at the gray line of fence posts running down toward the creek bend. He said, "If that's true, then it's been carrying pieces of my family for a very long time." I asked him if that frightened him. He was quiet, not uncomfortable quiet, thinking quiet. "No," he said. "I think it just makes me sorry for it." The last sighting Albert told me about was not his own. It was his granddaughter's. From 3 nights before we spoke. She had called him from the old farmhouse, his son's place now. The same lower pasture, the same fence line, new posts mixed among the ancient ones. And she was whispering. He could tell right away. Not panicked, just whispering the way you do when you're trying not to disturb something in the room with you. 3rd night running. It had the wool. It was working the posts. It reached the bend in the fence and stopped, the way it always stopped at that bend. And it turned, and it looked at the house. Albert told her what his grandmother had told him 65 years before, in a voice as plain and calm as a weather report. Stay still, breathe slow, don't go to the window, don't let it see you see it, wait for morning. She was quiet a moment. Then she asked what it wanted. He said he wasn't sure anyone had ever truly known. That it just wanted what it always wanted. To read what was written in the wood and stone and soil of a place. To press its gray wool into the grain of old things and draw out what it found there, to carry it away somewhere. And what does it do with all of it, she asked. The line was very quiet. I expect it keeps it safe, he said. The way old places keep things. The way a deep hollow keeps the fog. The way a stone keeps cold long after the sun has moved on. I expect it just holds it. Everything it's gathered. He heard her breathing slow down. Settle. Try to sleep, he told her. It won't come to the door. It never does. It's not interested in the doors. I drove back out of Pendleton County the following morning. Kept my window down despite the cold. Watched the fence lines along the 2-lane road. The old cedar posts gone gray and soft in early light. The rusted wire strung between them. The way the ground fog sat in the low places like something that had been there since before the road was laid. I thought about what it would mean for something like that to exist. Something that moves through the high country in the dark, unhurried, reading the accumulated weight of lives lived close to the land, drawing out whatever it finds in old wood touched by old hands, carrying it away. I don't know where it goes when the sun comes up, but I have found, to my own mild surprise, that the thought does not disturb me the way it maybe ought to, because there are worse things, aren't there? And to have your grief, your losses, the hard residue of years lived hard in a hard place, read by something patient, something that does not flinch from what it finds, something that takes it away and keeps it somewhere in whatever archive a thing like that maintains. There are worse things than to be gathered. Case file 417. Closed. For now. If the story found you tonight, if you listened all the way to the end and something in it settled into you the way cold settles into old wood, leave a word down below. Just one, if that's all you have. Tell me what you felt when it turned and looked at the house. Tell me if you've ever seen something working a fence line after dark and couldn't explain it. The archives read every comment, every single one. And if you're new here, if someone or something brought you to this channel tonight for the first time, consider staying. Subscribe. There are more files, more case numbers, more things that don't have clean explanations. A like on this video tells the archive that this case file is worth keeping open. So if it stayed with you, keep it open. Sleep well, if you can.